Hello and welcome back to the Premier Injuries podcast. This one we're calling the Whey Captain podcast. I didn't really put on a good Geordie accent. Let me try that again. Whey Captain. I mean, how do you rate that, Ben? Was that any good as a?
It's a C plus. Good effort, but I'm hoping for better things down the line. Whey Captain podcast.
There you go. And this is going to be all season. So I'll have, 36 other attempts at that Whey Captain, and hopefully it sounds a little bit better. But as stated, from the title there, we're going to be talking about the best captaincy picks for game week 2. But before we get into that, remember to subscribe to the channel. We're going to have weekly videos on all things FPL, including captains, best 11, weekend reviews, looking at the nitty gritty data. And then don't forget, Thursdays, we have our very special Premier Injuries podcast with Dr. Raj. We talk about all things injuries, all the essential information that you need before the weekend. But I've already introduced you, Ben, because I got you in there. But Ben? How are you today? And how enjoyable is it that the season's back?
It's great to be back, mate. Great to watch football again. And more important than the football, because we've had that for a little while now. It's great to see supporters in the ground. And almost, look, we didn't do too well on Sunday. Disappointing. We offered hope. We did put up a little resistance, took the lead twice. But ultimately, it was almost, and I've seen this at other grounds as well, and it won't last, so we'll make the most of it. But the result was a secondary. I think it was just being there, and it was being a part of it, and it was just hearing the crowd, sampling the atmosphere, and that excitement and that buzz around the place, which made great. Game week 1 was brilliant. It was good to see football, real football, back. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. Now enjoy it while it lasts, before I'm sick and I'm dying for the season to finish.
I mean, that quite often happens with Arsenal. I don't know if it's the same with Newcastle fans, but I totally agree with you, actually. I think one of the most amazing things about the season being back is I didn't really care that Arsenal lost. Maybe that's because I'm more used to it now after years of us falling off. But I was so happy for Brentford. I loved seeing how infused their crowd was. I kind of got almost that feeling 75 years of pent up, wanting them to be at the top, and then just kind of seeing them all celebrate together. I think it was brilliant. And moments like that, I think you're right. It transcends football. It didn't really matter about the results this weekend. Maybe in a month or so's time, when we're a bit more used to it, it will. But we do have to talk about captains. That is what we're here for today. And I think it's the big discussion point in the community every week. Before we go into actual picks, my advice, and I don't know if you agree with this, I usually tend to stick with premium assets. So, like the Fernandez, maybe the Sons, Salahs. That's why they're in your team. And usually you have to ask yourself a question. If you're not captaining them for a few weeks at a time, are they really worth owning? Are they worth that points per million? Otherwise, you could spend that money elsewhere in your team if you're not considering these people as your captains. But the first one that I want to bring up, Ben, is Bruno Fernandez. For me, this is my favourite pick for this game week. I think Manchester United, they looked fantastic in that first game. Bruno himself was on good form. I think the whole kind of, is the Portuguese Bruno going to turn up? He didn't. He was so good. The Red Devils are season's second best record in away games. And then you look at Southampton, they've been absolutely dreadful. Since I think January time, second half of the season, one of the worst teams in terms of all data. And if the season had started at game week 19, they would have gone down in bottom position. So that really shows you how bad they'd been. Also, last game week, Southampton had the second worst XG conceded. So the leakiness is not going away. Ben, do you think that maybe it could be another 9-0 scoreline like we saw last season at Southampton?
I think if I do recall correctly, I think Southampton had a player sent off within the first 2 minutes, 90 seconds of that game at Old Trafford. And it was backs against the wall from that point. I don't think it'll be as many as 9, but given what we've seen on that opening weekend and the form or the lack of form that Southampton have carried over from last season and the way United started against their rivals Leeds at Old Trafford, then it wouldn't surprise me, if United were to get at least 2, 3, potentially 4 goals. Southampton, it's a tough one. There's a lot of inexperience. There's a few surprise selection decisions from Ralph Hasenhüttl last weekend. Walker Peters being one of those, and I think Bednarek was on the bench. And it's all well and good bringing players into that squad, but players need to get acclimatized, to the rigors of the Premier League, and throwing too many into that squad. Maybe it's backfired a little bit. And for me, I would like to see Fraser Forster between the sticks. I am not an Alex McCarthy fan.
So you agree then that Bruno is one of the top picks for this weekend. And I think the appeal of him as well isn't just, from his open play antics. I think it's going to be, Southampton here, they've lost the talisman, Ings. They've lost somebody so important in their defence, Ryan Bertrand. They've lost Vestergaard. I mean, this is kind of almost a ragtag team now. This is almost cobbled together at the last moment because they've really struggled there. And I think this is going to be brilliant. Fernandez can score from the dead balls. He'll be on penalties. This is a great opportunity. And I think that almost the away game effect, people being in the crowd, won't affect Man United too much. That they've been fine in kind of the COVID situation. I think they'll be fine with St. Mary's. I don't think it matters to them too much. They've been so good on the road. But let's move it to somebody who is at home this game week, and it's Mo Salah. Ben, talk us through why he's such a good pick for this game week.
Yeah, for me, look, it's a real toss-up between the two. These are the two heavyweights of the Premier League this weekend. And for somebody who loves a differential, for me, these early game weeks are not a time to be messing around. It's got to be Bruno or Mo this weekend. And for me, I'm just leaning towards Salah. First and foremost, we have Liverpool playing at Anfield for the first time since March 2020. And of all of those top flight teams, you sort of have that inclination. You suspect that Liverpool, with that Anfield roar, the roar of the Kop, it probably affected them a lot more than it did certainly other teams. They lost that 68 game unbeaten run, and they actually, they were defeated 3 times during that COVID hit. Yeah, and that really hit home hard. So I think they come into the season, they've got a point to prove. And they started off on the front foot. They got a great result at Norwich. Everybody expected their win, but they still had to go up against a fairly buoyant Norwich team. It's always difficult with that home support game one, but they got off to a flyer, and Mo grabbed himself a goal, a well-taken goal, and got himself 2 assists as well. So for me, just from that respect, that makes Mo Salah a very appealing prospect. And then you're looking at the opposition. In Burnley, they just don't seem to have that steeliness of the Burnleys that we know under Sean Dyche. There has been very little off the field movement this team. And in fact, when I went to pick my starting 11 last week, and I went through some of my existing predicted 11 sheets, of all of the teams that I had, the Burnley team was one that I could almost just leave. I didn't really have to touch it if I didn't want to, because feasibly, they had that same starting 11. Certainly they've had that same backline. And maybe there's a little bit of staleness in that team. They didn't finish, the last season very well. I think across the last 9 games, they averaged 2 goals a game, although that record did improve over the last 3 away from Turf Moor. But, when you have players that are caught in a little bit of a rut, maybe lacking a little bit of confidence, you need to bring that little bit of freshness in, that little bit of competition within the squad. I think Sean Dyche is frustrated. They have new owners at the club, but there just doesn't seem to be any money to spend. And almost you're creating this perfect storm with Liverpool riding on the crest of a wave, coming into the season strong with a point to prove, to shoot down some of the doubters, and Mo Salah doing exactly what Mo Salah does.
I think the thing about Mo Salah as well is he's in, tip-top shape. He's been rested most of the summer. He's had a fabulous pre-season. He's looking in such good form. Like you said there, really good against Norwich, 1 goal, 2 assists for himself. But Liverpool themselves, they seem to have kind of got back to their old ways in terms of like the last 9 games of last season. They were overperforming XG again. They were overperforming in attack and defence. They were keeping clean sheets. They looked so good. And then they started off the season. Yes, it's Norwich, but you have to play who's in front of you. Arsenal, people thought that they were going to smash Brentford, but Liverpool got the job done. 3 goals, the most shots in the box, drawing at the top there of any team, and the most big chances created as well with 4 in that game. They just looked so good. Burnley are going to be worried. And you've mentioned it there that there's not this old Burnley that once was of kind of big teams would play against them and be a little bit worried. They'd go, oh, that's going to be a tough one. At home, Burnley's results have just tumbled. And I think that they've got serious concerns. I know that Dyche is an amazing manager. He should probably be considered for sainthood or something because he works miracles each season. But genuinely, this season, their squad is looking really thin. That they've not given any investment. They've not really put anybody in them. And I think it's going to be a worry. And that's going to be good. And in front of the home crowd at Anfield, Mo Salah is a really, really scary prospect. The next one that has to be up for consideration, I'm going to, front this up and say I'm not too warm on Man City prospects because long term, you're probably going to get out Mahrez. You're not going to hold him long term. And for me, it's just a bit of a dangerous one. But if you do have him in your team, if you're a bit more of a risky player, he looks really good. In terms of his underlying data, last season, he averages 0.44 goals per 90, 0.28 assists per 90. And like we said there, Liverpool did a demolition job on Norwich. And I think Norwich's defence, we saw last season in the Championship, they're not very good. They overperformed there. This season in the Premier League, they're going to be caught out. Citizens are not going to take any prisoners. They're just going to go absolutely through them like a train, I guess through snow or something. It is going to be absolute carnage for them. And yes, Mahrez was quiet against Spurs, but it's a different kettle of fish. Spurs have really good players. They have really good plans. I think that Farke is a good manager, but there has to be questions asked that he doesn't really change the style of the team for these big games. He kind of sticks with really nice football, which Norwich are good at. They play nice football, but you have to ask the question, nice football only gets you so far with the quality of the players, and it's just going to play into the hands of somebody like Mahrez. So I think there's quite a few absences or question marks in that City team, but the positive thing is that Mahrez is probably going to be almost thrusted with even more importance for getting the result there. But what are your thoughts on Man City with the situation there? You've got Foden potentially out. You've got De Bruyne potentially out. There's quite a few question marks in that team. Does that make you a little bit reticent to almost have Riyad in your team?
No, I mean, I'm obviously Bruno and Salah aside, then Mahrez does tick a lot of boxes. I would consider him one of the elder statesmen now of that City team. And, we have Kevin De Bruyne, who's building fitness. We have Jack Grealish, who's just finding his feet at the club. Ilkay Gundogan, forced off with a shoulder problem last weekend, although he has been involved in small-sided games. Sterling getting up to speed. Ferran Torres, just learning his craft, still learning his trade. So for me, these are opportunities for me, Riyad Mahrez to stand up, be counted, take on that extra responsibility, and really, take that on his shoulders and carry City forward. And if there was ever a game that you want to bounce back after the disappointing performance and defeat in week one, then unfortunately, the Canaries serve up the perfect fixture.
They do indeed, and it's a great captaincy choice. We'll get on to maybe analysis of Morris in another kind of podcast, because, like I said, I do have my worries about him. But for this fixture, if you own him, he is a great choice. Now we're going to end on what is, I think, a very maverick. And of course, we have to have a maverick choice because you're differential dinnery. We put down here Danny Ings / Callum Wilson. I'm going to go with the Callum Wilson camp. You give your side, though, of why maybe people should decide on Danny Ings.
Yeah, well, the obvious pick for me would have been Callum Wilson, but I've tried to take the rose-tinted glasses off and manoeuvre away from the visit as it would be at Villa Park this weekend. What I would say, the caveat is potentially these are two great picks, because this could be, based on those game week one fixtures and performances, this could be a really good high-scoring draw. Now, for me, Dean Smith, I think Aston Villa have done quite well in the sale of Jack Grealish. I think that benefits them more, probably, than it may benefit Manchester City. And what that does, that just opens Aston Villa up to a more flexible, fluid approach to the games. They don't necessarily have to stick with a 4-2-3-1 as they did with Grealish in the side and Ollie Watkins as that lone striker. And Ollie Watkins has trained, so I'm fairly confident that he will be available. And if that's the case, I think we could see Aston Villa go with a 4-4-2 formation, which for me, like I say, is a great opportunity, for Ings and Watkins to really solidify that partnership. I think they offer both threats. And in terms of, just Ings generally, he's probably one of the most clinical strikers in the Premier League. You're talking then about the players who are able to back him up, that supply line. We have Emiliano Buendia. We have, if he starts, Leon Bailey came on. Great experience in the Bundesliga, came on and got the assist last weekend. You had John McGinn even joining the attack. You've got El Ghazi. So you've got lots of players in and around there. And finally, the kicker for me was seeing Emil Kraft in that Newcastle backline against West Ham. He was certainly a player that West Ham looked to target. It was maybe a little bit of a surprise with Fabian Shaw and Jamal Lascelles both sitting on the bench. But what we do know from Steve Bruce, he says, those two centre-backs aren't fully fit. Now, they will have another weeks of training under the belt, and they could be involved. But even if they are, you suspect that they won't be in top condition. And against the prospect of facing Ings and Watkins, you're really going to have to be on your mettle. So for me, like I say, Ings just gets a nod over Callum Wilson.
See, I think this is going to be a really, really high scoring game. I have reservations over Aston Villa. And I said this on the kind of fan team podcast. Looking at that game, Ings only had one shot. It was the penalty, of course, and that's kind of a good thing that he's going to be on those situations there. But you look at like Callum Wilson, he was much more involved with the game with Newcastle. He had 3 shots in the box. He was kind of, much more involved in the build-up. He had 4 shots as well, 1.03 XGI, 1.02 XG. So all of that was coming from, just him attacking. But that was from open play, whereas Ings' XG was literally just 1 penalty. And so the fact that Wilson had a few opportunities as well just makes it a bit more appealing to me. The other thing that worries me a little bit going forward is Aston Villa's defence. Matt Targett, he was subbed off, and then Ashley Young came from further up the field to play in defence, and it just added more questions to me than answers of, well, how's Aston Villa going to cope without Grealish? So for me, I think Ings will score. I think Aston Villa will probably score maybe 1 or 2. But I think it's going to be one of those high-scoring games where you just don't know what the hell is happening. You don't know somebody's arse from their elbow at the end of the day. It's going to be absolutely incredible, these scenes. And I think Callum Wilson will just edge Ings for me as the Maverick captaincy option, because I just feel that Aston Villa defence has been really bad. Martinez is a fantastic goalkeeper, but Wilson is so clinical, especially at the start of seasons. You know, when he's had that pre-season in his legs, he looks really good. But then, you know, Newcastle playing this amazing Steve Bruce style of whatever, I don't know what to call it. You know better than me when he said, I'm going to play it my way. And it just, it happened. So I think we've kind of given two sides of who to pick. The final question has to be, who is going to be your pick this game week? Who is going to be your captain for Fantasy Premier League and for Fan Team?
Yeah, I can't look past Mo Salah, I'm afraid. I went with Mo over Bruno last weekend, and the roar of the Kop in Anfield once again, you know, sways it against inferior opposition. Big Mo.
I am very, very conflicted. My brain is kind of saying Bruno is playing a terrible Southampton defence. They have really bad data, Southampton. But then I looked at the projected points for Mo Salah this week, and he is head and shoulders above anybody else. And so my data half of my brain is thinking, well, really, I should go with the person with the highest projected points, Mo Salah himself, with outstanding data. So at the moment, it is on Bruno Fernandez, but I will keep people up to date. I want to be as clear as possible. You know, these things can change. Somebody could get injured, whatever. At the moment, it is on Bruno, just because I think Southampton, they're in for a shellacking again. Maybe not 9-0, but it's going to be, you know, cricket scoreline at least. But that is the wrap up for the captaincy. We're going to have a few more videos this week. We're going to be going through this season very consistently with lots of content around the Premier League. And just make sure to subscribe, because we're going to be covering all sorts, me and Ben, but we'll also have Dr. Raj. We'll be having guests as well, like we did in the build up to the season. You're not going to want to miss it. It's all for free. It's all there. Just that little click, put a notification on, and then you'll know whenever we have content coming out. But from me, it's a goodbye and a good luck. And I'm throwing it over to Ben to see us out.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And that's it for the Whey Captain podcast, the first one with another 36 to go during the course of the season. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm sure you'll have lots of opinions and insights into what we said. So bang them in the comment box below. We do read them, and we try to respond to as many as we possibly can. But for now, good luck in game week 2, and we'll see you very soon on our next video. Ciao for now.